Welcome back to another live stream. It's good to be back. I told you guys I was gonna do more live streams, so I do what I say. Here we are. It might have been a while, but here we are. And today we're gonna be coding even more than we did in the last live stream, and we're gonna be learning, more importantly, a new front-end framework, and it's gonna be Svelte. I myself is a Next.js fan. I love Next.js. I know Next.js very, very well, but I've been hearing a lot of good things about Svelte. So that's what we're going to check out today. And we're just going to be following their official documentation because it seems like they have an official built-in learning environment / IDE that is I mean, it seems to be pretty built out. So that's going to be interesting to try as well. But really, the point of this is not that I think I'm going to be building more applications in Svelte. I think Next.js is probably like your guy in most cases if you're going to build something complicated. But the thing with learning different frameworks is not necessarily that you have to adopt them for the rest of your life and become this fanboy. It's more that I think you learn different ways of seeing things. For instance, last year I had to learn a bit about Swift and iOS development, and I wouldn't consider myself a Swift developer or an iPhone developer, but now I know a bit about that world, and it actually helped me as a web developer to understand how they're coming to things, how they're thinking about app development. So it's always good to shift your mental landscape. So that's all we're trying to do with this Svelte tutorial here. So really the goal of this is just to like get the basics down. What is Svelte about? What are its pros and cons? And yeah, what can we bring back when we do actually develop in Next.js? So we're just going to get right into it here. And we're going to be following this learning environment. They also have docs here as well as examples. So I'm going to open up them as well. And yeah, we're just going to go ahead and create our own project here and see what the directory structure looks like. So npm create svelte. Let's see what it looks like. Let's choose the demo app. Yes, that sounds good. I'm going to choose TypeScript. I hope you guys can still see my screen. You can. I'm going to zoom in just a bit. There you go. I'm going to zoom in here as well. That's better. Yes. Add as ESLint. And we're off the ground. Okay. Let's get in there. Let's npm install. And let's have a look at this directory structure. So the first thing I notice are the files are a bit different. Yes, I'm going to install the Svelte Visual Code plugin as well for syntax highlighting. Enable. Okay, I mean, if you look at the routes here, this is a bit different. You have the .svelte extension. And when I get in here, it seems like JSX. Yeah, this is very different, but you have these three main sections, right? You have a script section where you're importing some stuff, you're like doing data manipulation, you have a function. Then you have a second section, which is your actual CSS or really the HTML and your classes. And then the last section is your styling. That's very interesting. That's an interesting pattern to have like everything in one file and you're doing it in this order. Then we have another file here called pluspage.ts. So that just seems to be some sort of configuration. And let's try to start this app and see what it actually does. So I think it's probably npm start or npm dev. It's npm dev. And let's see what this example app does. Oh, okay, that's odd. It opens on port 5173. Okay, so it's a counter app about Svelte, some sort of game here. Interesting. Okay, so let's continue with the tutorial and see if we can make sense of this. So in Svelte, an application is composed from one or more components. A component is a reusable self-contained block of code that encapsulates HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Sounds pretty similar to React and Next.js so far. And it's written in a .svelte file, as we saw. Now, the app.svelte file is what we'll be editing in here. And we're going to start by adding data. So we can do that by adding a script section. And we can say, let's name equal to Svelte. Cool, cool. And now we can refer to it in the markup. Excuse me. Okay, cool. So we declared a variable in the script section, and then we can refer to it in the markup section. So this is basically almost like a pure HTML file so far. I mean, you're getting rid of the boilerplate. Usually in a pure HTML file, you have a header or a head tag, you have a document tag, and a bunch of stuff. So this is like a stripped down version of that. It's pretty cool, actually. Very bare bones. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, and sure, we can do 2 uppercase here to demonstrate that, yes, we can actually do JavaScript within the markup section. Okay, let's continue. So just like you can use curly braces to control text, you can also use them to control element attributes. So in this case, we are changing the source of an image tag, and we're getting the image tag to render from the script above. Okay, cool. It's not uncommon to have an attribute where the name and the value are the same, like source equals source, right? And Svelte gives us a convenient shorthand for these cases. So you can just do source. That's cool. Okay, let's continue. We're trailblazing here. Speedrunning Svelte. I mean, it's very straightforward so far. It's going to be interesting to see like how the rendering is working. But in terms of syntax, this is really easy to understand. I hope you guys think it's as easy to understand, but hopefully if you've done some React, this should all be pretty straightforward. Just like in HTML, you can write or you can add a style tag to your component. So let's add some styles here. Sure. So we have a paragraph. We can see it here. Now, if we want to add some styles, we can do P color goldenrod. I have not heard of that color before, but look at that. It works. It's like a yellow. Let's check that color out. Golden rod. I have never heard of this color before. Okay, so it's based on a plant. That's probably why. It's if it's an American plant. I haven't heard of it. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm not going to do all of those styles, but like the point here is you got the markup section, you got the script section that is first, and then you got the style section. Actually, one thing we could try is, would it work if we put the style section above? Okay, cool. That actually works. And what if we put a script section here and we say const sentence equals, this is a paragraph. And then we reference the sentence within the markup section. That works. And see, this is how you learn new stuff, right? You're trying the edge cases. You're trying to map out the territory by trying to make it break. Like, when does it work? When doesn't it work? And as you can see, I could also put the script section. I'll zoom in a bit more. But I could put the script section underneath, so it doesn't seem to care about order. Now, I do like the order that we saw, which is first script, aka data. Like, you separate in terms of concerns. So if your first concern would be data flow, second would be the rendering layer, and third would be the styling layer. So this all makes sense to me. And we'll just continue. Next up is nested components. Very cool. Very cool. So you can import components just like you can in React. If we add a script section here again, you can do import nested from, and then as you can see here, we have a nested component that they provided us. So you can do nested.svelte, and boom, we've imported it. Now, if we want to reference it, we can just do that here in the markup section. I mean, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. We can move it, we can put it there. And do you notice how fast, how quickly this is re-rendering? That's one of the things I've heard about Svelte, that it's supposed to be like really, really fast because it's so lightweight, right? So it's going to be interesting to learn about how it's actually working in terms of rendering. Yeah. Okay, so we learned about nested components. Yeah. They continue. Ordinarily, strings are inserted as plain text, meaning that characters like pointy brackets have no special meaning. But sometimes you need to render HTML directly into a component. For example, the words you're reading right now exist in a Markdown file that gets included on this page as a blob of HTML. In Svelte, you can do this with the special @HTML tag. Interesting. Let's try that. So if we do, instead of just doing string here, it contains some Markdown formatting, or rather some HTML formatting. You can do @HTML, and it will actually format it to HTML. That's cool. That's good to know. I guess if you're writing like a Markdown blog, this would be very helpful to just do that, and then you could format your Markdown. That's an HTML blob. Warning. They write here, warning, Svelte doesn't perform any sanitization of the expression inside of the HTML before it gets inserted. Right, so it just naively inserts the string as HTML. So this isn't an issue if the content is something you trust, like an article that you wrote, but for untrusted user content, like a comment on your article, it's critical that you manually escape it. Otherwise, you risk exposing your users to cross-site scripting attacks. Yes, very true. So true, King. Okay, now we're getting to some fun stuff. Reactivity. At the heart of Svelte is a powerful system of reactivity for keeping the DOM in sync with your application state. For example, in response to an event. To demonstrate it, we're first going to wire up an event handler, and we'll learn more about these very soon. But okay, this is looking very similar to React. In order to add reactivity to this button, you're writing on : click equals increment. An increment is a function that we have inside of the script. And we could just add some event handler code here. We do count plus equals to 1, which means if we click it now, we should see count increase, and it does. So it's as easy as that. This is just like React, where you can have an event handler and the content will actually react on the variable that is being changed. Let's continue. Declarations. Svelte automatically updates the DOM when your component's state changes. So as we said, that's the same for React. All good so far. Often some parts of a component state need to be computed from other parts, such as full name derived from a first name and a last name, and recomputed whenever they change. Yeah, very common. Okay, so here we're diverging a bit from React, because here they're introducing a concept called reactive declarations, and they look like this. Let's try to write that. So they are doing a $, doubled equals count times 2. Okay. If a reactive statement consists entirely of an assignment to an undeclared variable, Svelte will inject a let declaration on your behalf. Okay. So basically what this means that we just wrote, $, doubled equals count times 2, is we're telling Svelte, rerun this code whenever any of the referenced values change. And once you get used to it, there's no going back. Okay. Let's try to use that in our markup. So if we add this paragraph here, we should see the doubled count updating. Very, very good. Now, does this mean if we do let doubled equals count times 2, what do you think is going to happen when we click on this button now? Is it going to actually recompute, or is it going to stay stale? I would guess it's staying stale, because otherwise what would be the point of having this specialized syntax for reactive declarations? Let's try it. Yep, as expected, only the count is updating, because we're only updating the count inside of the function. And because doubled is computed based on count, we need to tell Svelte, hey, this is a reactive declaration. Now, this is similar to React in that well, actually, it's not. It's not similar to React, because in React, if you did a let here, it would get recomputed, but it would also not work at all because as the component re-rendered, it would reinitialize count and it would reinitialize doubled. So unless you declared these variables outside of the component, they would just be 0 all of the time. Otherwise, you could make it work, I think. But the best practice or the way to do this in React is that you're using use state. And use state is like this island where you can put your data and it's gonna stay there unbothered, moisturized in its own lane, no matter how many times the component is re-rendering. So yeah, this is a bit of a different paradigm, a different way to recompute data. But I'm liking it. It's cool. Yeah, and you don't have to use reactive values. They're telling us here that you could do this. Just write count times 2, and that works as well. But reactive values are valuable when you need to reference them multiple times. Yeah. And it's probably a bit more computationally cheap to do that. Okay, let's continue to statements. We're almost done with part 1 here. I mean, so far it's all very sensical. I'm liking this. Okay, we're not limited to declaring reactive values. We can also run arbitrary statements reactively. For example, we can log the value of count whenever it changes. That's cool. So this, I guess, if we were to compare it to React, would be like a use effect, because you use effects to say, whenever one of these dependencies in the dependency array changes, I want to run this code. And we're doing the same here, but honestly, this is even cleaner because you don't even have to declare the dependency array manually. Svelte seems to figure out that this only depends on count, so I'm gonna just infer that for you, which is really cool. And so and you can group multiple statements inside of a reactive statement like this. That's cool. And you can do if blocks. That's very, very cool. Now, where do I actually check the console here? Is it this console? Yeah, it's this console. Awesome. And you can do an alert, of course, because it's JavaScript at the end of the day inside of the script section. Now we're continuing to arrays and objects. Because Svelte's reactivity is triggered by assignments, using array methods like push and splice won't automatically cause updates. I mean, that's just the same in React, right? I'm sure we've all been there, right? You're manipulating an array of data in React, and as a beginner who doesn't know better, your first instinct is just to push and pop and splice the array. But that doesn't work. React doesn't trigger a re-render if you do that to an array. So what you need to do instead is completely recreate the array and then reassign that to the variable. And here they're telling us it's the same thing in Svelte. If you want reactivity, you need to reassign array variables. So they've got an example here. If we say add a number, nothing happens, even though we're pushing a number to the array here. And the reason it doesn't work is we need to reassign it. Now, we could do this very easily. We could just do numbers equals numbers. Yeah, and now it works. Cool. We have a reactive variable here, which is the sum. And yeah, this is a more idiomatic solution. This is what I would do in React. For instance, when you have a set state, this is usually what you do. You recompile the array by spreading the previous value and then adding the new entry like this at the end. And so this works as well. Very cool. Assignments to properties of arrays and objects. For instance, object.foo plus equals 1 work the same way as assignments to the values themselves. So yeah, you need to completely reassign that property that you're changing. A simple rule of thumb is the name of the updated variable must appear on the left-hand side of the assignment. For example, const object equals this, or const foo equals this. And this will not trigger reactivity on object foo bar unless you follow it up with object equals object. Yeah. Very good reminders. So far, we've dealt exclusively with internal states. That is to say, the values are only accessible within a given component. But in any real component or application, you'll need to pass data from one component down to its children. Yes, and this is where it gets interesting. I mean, this is, if you ask me, this is like 90% of web development is managing states and managing it well. So let's see how Svelte solves the problem of prop passing or prop drilling. In Svelte, we can use the export keyword. So let's try that. Here we have a variable called answer. So if we do export let answer, we can then import it. Wait a minute. Okay. Let's switch on our brains here. What's actually happening? We're importing the nested components. Cool. So far, so good. Then we're passing a prop with the value 42. Okay. So far, so good. What are we then doing in nested Svelte to use the prop? Interesting. So we're using the keyword export to use the past data. I mean, that is a bit confusing. If you're coming from React, this should be confusing. Because normally, if you want to use a prop in React, you declare it in the signature of the component function or class, and you type it if it's in TypeScript. And then you export the component. But here, we're actually exporting what we're passing in. But, I mean, that's just the way they're doing it, I guess. So, as they say here, this may feel a little weird at first. That's not how export normally works in JavaScript modules, but just roll with it for now. It'll soon become second nature. Sure. Let's keep going. We can easily specify default values for props inside nested.svelte. Okay. Okay. So you can do default values. So now it's 42. But if we default it to, um, you know, girls, money, and drugs, and we do another nested component here without a past props, we should see that. Yeah, so the answer is girls, money, and drugs. Not me, that's what the program is telling you. Okay, don't blame me. So here in this exercise, we're doing prop spreading. Very cool. So in this component, we're getting all of these props, name, version, speed, website, and we're just rendering them here. Very cool. And if we just want to pass them all, we can do this, which is prop spreading, and we'll see it all come there. So this is exactly like React. This should not be news to you if you've done React. You can spread the props like this. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of this, actually. I think it's better to be explicit about what you're passing, but it's good to know that you can do that here. And then they're saying we could also do here, if you need to reference all the props that were passed into a component, including ones that weren't declared with export, you can do so by accessing props directly. Okay, good to know. If blocks. Okay, we're controlling the flow. Let's see. HTML doesn't have a way of expressing logic like conditionals and loops, but Svelte does. So far, Svelte is like this abstracted version of HTML, right? You don't have all of the boilerplate tags. You only have the script, the Markdown, and the style tags. But now they're introducing some new stuff, which is not HTML, which is like conditional rendering. So in React, you can use ternary expressions to conditionally render a component. That's very common. And here you can do something similar. So here we can add a block of Markdown saying if count is bigger than 5, let's actually render this. Right? So we're clicking it and now it's 6 and we can see it. That's pretty cool. So the syntax is just curly brackets, hashtag if, and you're ending with curly brackets /if. Cool. You can also do else blocks like this. That's cool. Note, a hashtag character always indicates a block opening tag, and a / character always indicates a block closing tag. A colon character, as in else, indicates a block continuation tag. Don't worry, you've already learned this. You've already learned almost all of the syntax that Svelte adds to HTML. Well, that's good news. That is really good news. It seems like Svelte is a simple framework. Yeah, you can chain multiple else blocks. Very cool. Next, we have each blocks. Very similar, it seems, to if else blocks. So if we add each here, what's actually happening here? Hmm. So each is basically just a syntax for each in JavaScript, but you have that built in Svelte. So in React, if you're rendering a list, you usually do the array objects, or sorry, the array dot map. But here, it seems like you're using Svelte syntax to do that. So here we're rendering buttons by doing hashtag each, and then for each color in colors, and you can also access the index here as a second parameter. Cool. By default, when you modify the value of an each block, it will add and remove DOM nodes at the end of the block and update any values that have changed. Let's read that again. By default, when you modify the value of an each block, it will add and remove DOM nodes at the end of the block and update any values that have changed. Yes? It's easier to show why than explain why this is not necessarily what you want. Okay? So in this case here, we have a thing component. It's just called thing. And it sets the emoji as a constant on initialization. But the name is passed in via a prop. Okay, so let's try the app. We click remove first thing and it removes an item here. It just slices the array of objects. Pretty straightforward. And we got this map here, or the each syntax in Svelte. So what the function does, it slices the array and then updates the name value in the remaining DOM nodes, but not the emoji, which is fixed when each thing component is created. I see. So there's a bug here. The emojis are not updated. So instead, we'd like to remove only the first thing component and its DOM node and leave the others unaffected. And to do that, we specify a unique identifier or quote unquote key for each iteration of the each block. And you do that by adding parentheses and then thing.id. Cool. So now when we're removing, the emojis are mapped correctly and we're not changing the rest of the each loop. So here, thing.id is the key, which tells Svelte to figure out how to update what, basically. I guess it's kind of like in React when you're doing key equals some unique value, but here you're doing it inside of the loop syntax. So next up, we have await blocks. Most web applications have to deal with asynchronous state at some point, and Svelte makes it easy to await the value of promises directly in your markup. Cool. That's interesting. You can do that directly in the markup. Now, this is actually giving me some Next.js vibes because, like, one of the later features that Next.js have added, right, is server components where you can do await inside of the component function. So this is pretty similar to that. This is looking cool. Let's try this. So just to check out what this function does. Okay, it's fetching some random number endpoint that we don't have the source code for, but it's going to take, I don't know, 100 milliseconds or something. And we're conditionally rendering markup based on the state of the request. So promise is this promise here. So when we're awaiting the promise, we're going to render wait. If we are getting a result, we're going to say, here's the result. And if it errors out, we're going to print the error message. So let's try it. Waiting, number, waiting, number. That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, it's basically like a server component. I mean, that's very, very cool. All right, guys. I think it's time for me to do some actual work today, but this has been insightful because essentially we know all of the Svelte syntax now. Like you can do like this if else statements within the markup. You can do loops. You can even do await statements. And what we have left here is like the events and bindings for inputs. You also have some lifecycle methods, it seems like. And they're talking a bit about stores. But man, this is a really good tutorial. Like super lightweight, super good interactive editor. I really recommend it. Great job by the Svelte team. I guess I'm curious, like, who's behind this? Wasn't Svelte acquired by Next? Yeah, they were acquired by Vercel, I think. Because this guy, Rich Harris, the founder of Svelte, I'm pretty sure he's working for Vercel now. Yeah. See? So Next.js scooped up Svelte. I'd be curious how much they actually bought Svelte for or acqui-hired Rich Harris for. You know? What do you guys think? I don't want to... Could it be 100K? Less than 100K? A million? They've got a lot of contributors here. So this project, this framework is probably not going away, right? So there are some really good patterns in here. Like I especially like the way they handled reactivity with reactive declarations and statements. And there's some stuff we didn't even go into here. Like here they have transitions. That's pretty cool. I mean, this must be, I gotta say, this must be one of the better docs I've ever seen. Like all of these examples, holy crap. Like if you don't know Svelte, you have zero excuses. You could learn Svelte in an hour. That's what we just did, right? Let's see how long we've been going for. We've been going for 45 minutes and we already know Svelte. So guys, click the link in the description. Give yourself a favor and learn some good web development paradigms. And I'll see you guys in the next stream. Take care.